Hello, beautiful MILFs, and welcome back to another episode of the MILFs Who Pivot podcast, where the term MILF is short for Money Making Independent Lady Friends. I'm your host, Bianca Terry, and each week I'll either be interviewing or reading about amazing women who have pivoted in life to pursue their wildest dreams and wealth from a MILF's perspective. This podcast aims to motivate and encourage other MILFs to boldly explore uncharted paths towards a fresh and fabulous leveled up life. Today, I am joined by Sandra Possing, a dynamic speaker, life coach, and podcast host, helps driven millennials break through what's holding them back, like people pleasing, perfectionism, and imposter syndrome, and create extraordinary lives they love. Born in Scandinavia, raised in Los Angeles, and currently based in the San Francisco Bay Area, she also embodies the digital nomad lifestyle and runs her personal development company from her laptop wherever she goes. In addition to coaching hundreds of clients to new levels of success and happiness, Sandra has been featured in Apple News, Yahoo Finance, Outside Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, New York Weekly, America Daily News, among others. She's been interviewed on dozens of podcasts and has facilitated workshops for tech companies and nonprofits, and has led retreats in San Francisco, London, and San Diego. What a bio. Hey, Sandra, welcome. It's so nice to meet you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get into this topic.
Absolutely. A lot of what I read about you, a lot of what you talk about in your podcast really resonates with me. So I was really looking to our conversation. Let's get right into it. So I know what you're doing now, but let's talk about your younger self. What was younger Sandra doing in her 20s and 30s?
Oh man, I mean, the better question is like, what was she not doing? Because she was so all over the place that she was doing a lot of things. But I also give her so much credit. She was trying to figure things out. I look back at her now and I'm like, she was a scrappy lady. Like she was resourceful. She was resilient. She was determined, but she had no idea what she was doing. Like, not that she had no idea. So basically, I had no idea what I wanted to do when it came to anything related to career. I grew up being the people pleaser and the perfectionist and the good girl and the, great student, track star, mommy's little princess and all that. So I was really used to having like a roadmap. People are like, this is what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to be, and all the things. And I was just like, tick, 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 good girl.
Mhm.
And then I get to college and they're like, what major do you want to study? And I was like, aren't you going to tell me wait, I have to choose. Okay. And so it took me a couple of years and I was like undeclared for a while. And then I went and studied abroad and I came back and I think it was my fourth year of college. I was like, I should probably choose a major eventually if I want to graduate like this century. And so I picked anthropology, which was very true to my interests and my passions, but it's not exactly like a shoe in directly into some career. It's like most
Mhm.
anthropologists go into like archaeology or they become ethnographers or professors or, deep in academia. And I was like, none of those things are me. I just like people. I like studying people. Like, how are we the same? How are we different? And so then I graduate and I move up to the Bay Area and was like, all right, career, let's go. What do I do? And same thing. I was like, I didn't have a roadmap anymore. And so I kind of panicked, but I, was like, well, I got to, pay the bills. So I'll just do whatever in the meantime. So I did a lot of whatever. I worked in the service industry for several years. I bartended for about 3 years. I dabbled in like I was like the queen of side hustles. I
Okay,
worked,
so I was going to say, I remember reading that you knew in college, or maybe it was right after college, that you didn't want to work a 9 to 5. So, and I was also thinking, well, what did she do for money? You have to
yeah.
support yourself. But that's so, I mean, you had this clear idea of part of how you wanted to live your life, and that you knew that working for a 9 to 5 wasn't going to cut it for you. So you took that
Yeah.
knowledge, but you went out in the world like a young adult. You worked some jobs, I think you said for several years. So how did it lead, like, how did that road lead to coaching, which is what you're doing now?
So I think early on, I was lucky enough to start kind of like connecting the dots. Even though I had no
Mm.
idea, I was like, at least I know what I don't want. I don't want 9 to 5. I have to be able to go see my whole family's in Scandinavia. I'm like, I need to be able to travel and see my dad is in Sweden. I'm like, so
Mhm.
9 to 5 wasn't it. I also recognized pretty early on, I was like, I'm pretty much not employable. Like, I'm not going to do well with a boss telling me what to do. So I was like, okay, it's not that, but what does that mean? It took me a while to put together that led kind of inevitably to the path of entrepreneurship. And so I tried a lot of different things, and I think I embraced this just like process of elimination strategy. And I was like, every time I figure out something I don't want, it'll get me a little closer to what I do. And I was willing to try. I was experimenting. Like my quote unquote real jobs I was an IT recruiter for a while. I worked in finance, like the most unsexy part of dusty corner of finance, which is like selling life insurance and disability and long-term care, and like really just the
Oh, okay.
exact opposite of my personality. But I was like, I learned some stuff, including that I didn't want to work in finance. Um, but then most of what I did, I was drawn to entrepreneurs. I was like, I had friends from college recruit me to their startups. I bartended. I worked in fitness for about 7 or 8 years, which was like close. It was the closest thing, but I also hustled. I worked as like a promo model. I worked as a hair model. I worked as a security guard at like a EDM show one time. I did all sorts of random things. I signed up for every, paid experiment that I could from college through the rest of my 20s. Like I was all over the place, but I was really determined. And it was hard because also San Francisco is not an inexpensive place to live. So I was like barely making ends meet. I always somehow made it work. I did end up with a lot of debt eventually at one point, and that's a whole nother story of like my full financial makeover started 12 years ago. But ultimately it was fitness that was kind of the eye-opening part, because in fitness I realized, okay, it's not the physical body. It's but I like this empowerment thing. I like watching
Mhm.
someone be transformed in 6 weeks after a boot camp. They come in not believing in themselves or what their body can do, and they walk away like a total badass. And I'm like,
Right.
whatever that is, I want it, but it's not through push-ups and running. I like what something else. Luckily, through the fitness world, I started meeting coaches. It was like executive coaches and health coaches, and I was like, what, you guys seem like you love what you do, and you are in charge of your life. You make your own schedule. Like, what is this magic? I didn't even know the coaching world was a thing. I grew up reading self-help books. Like I loved all that stuff. I just didn't know that coaching was a career you could have. And so once I basically sat all of them down and like interrogated them like a full-on investigative reporter. I took it really seriously, like took notes, compiled them, organized them. And finally I was like, I think this coaching thing might be for me. Did a bunch of research, tested out some different schools, found the one I really liked. And literally the first day I walked into class, I looked around and I was like, first of all, this room is full of a bunch of really eccentric weirdos from all walks of life. Like, I am home. These are my people. And it just felt right. And then I never looked back since.
I love that. So how long ago how long ago was the coaching school?
So that was about 14 years ago. And I took
Okay.
that, like with many things in my life, having been an overthinker for all of, I would call myself a recovering overthinker now, but I've always been kind of like a slow burn for things. So I did the classes and I did the coaching school I went to, had an amazing leadership, 10 months leadership program that I did. And
Mhm.
instead of, launching a coaching business like right away, like I could have, I took a good couple of years to just sort of work up the courage and my confidence. And so it was 2012 that I finally worked up the courage to just launch a business. And then I did that concurrently with my fitness, the company I was working for, and doing personal training and stuff because I was too scared to do it completely on my own. And then
Mhm.
finally, it was about 2015 that I went all in, let go of everything else, and was like, I'm going to do this. That was around the time that
Wow.
I realized that being a coach also meant being an entrepreneur and having like, I couldn't just like, I'm a coach. And then they just come to I had to like learn sales and marketing and how to run a business and all of this. So that was a whole nother, like, okay,
Mhm.
whole nother chapter of learning. But yeah, so it's been
Absolutely.
about 12 years now.
Before, I want to dive a little bit more into how you knew it was time to take the leap. But before then, I want to mention through all of the things that you tried in your young working career, your young working life, it's like you took that as an adventure. You said,
Yes.
I'm going to try all these things, and if they work, they work, and if they don't, they don't. So many people are afraid to do that. oh, I don't want to spend time learning about this, or I really don't know if I want to try that. And then they end up stuck. So I think that's a really good thing to kind of glean on, especially for our listeners. Don't be afraid to try things. You can change your mind. Just like when you move somewhere, if you don't like it, you can always come back home. So fast forward
100%.
to the point where you felt like you were ready to take the leap. What was that like? And were there hard choices involved? Were there sacrifices? Did you feel like, you had this voice telling you, like, how did that happen?
Yes to all of those things. It really, and an adventure is like the perfect metaphor, because in a typical adventure, whether it's like I don't know, you're whitewater rafting or you're climbing a mountain or you're just
Mhm.
some new learning experience, it's like, it's hard. It's,
Yeah.
but it's exhilarating, and there's ups and downs, and there's like, a hero's journey, or like 1,000 hero's journeys baked into it, maybe some shamanic death, some ego death. Like, it's, an adventure is inherently not smooth sailing. It's not easy. It's not about settling. It's challenging yourself, overcoming challenges, failing a ton and learning from it, getting back up. So it's like, that's exactly what personal development is. It's exactly what entrepreneurship is.
Mhm.
And I think early on, I did in some shape or form decide, like, I'm going to see this as an adventure. I'm going to see this as a game. But it was so hard. I mean, I had so many,
Mhm.
you know, on my knees in the shower sobbing moments, because I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I'm like, I'm almost 30 and I'm still like bumbling around trying random side jobs. Most of my peers are deep into their careers now. They're like climbing ladders, they're getting promotions. And I'm like, what am I even doing? But underneath all of the doubt and the hardship and the challenge, there was like this undercurrent of something in me was like, which I would call soul, was speaking to me on some level through some, whatever different ways I was
Mhm.
receiving the information, that was like, keep going, because there's something here. Like, you know what you don't want now. So you're getting closer. You don't know what it is yet, and it's okay, but just like keep, like, be a detective,
Yeah.
do research, talk to people, follow the breadcrumbs. Like, the universe is winking at you, like, pay attention to the winks. And I think I learned early on too to listen to my body, because I think so many of us,
Mhm.
especially living in a place like San Francisco where it's very heady, very intellectual, everyone is like logic and success and this and that. And it's like, we're not taught to listen to our bodies, but our bodies are like these amazing beacons of, like, they want to tell us so many things, but they're like whispering quietly, because it's like, hi, I'm your intuition, I'm like in the corner with like lots of wisdom, and then the world is screaming at you like who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to dress and what you're supposed to do and all
Yeah.
this stuff, and it's like pretty hard to hear one over the other.
Oh.
So, but on some level, I felt enough of the, like, the feeling of what I would call being desire led. It feels so good in my body and in my
Mhm.
mind and in my emotions, versus the feeling of like, I'm doing what I think I should be doing because this is what people like. That just feels so gross to me. I've also trained myself to listen. So it's like, the
Yeah.
more I turned down the dial on external expectations and the more I turned up the dial on like desire and intuition. And then I started noticing, like, when things are in alignment, they flow. When I'm out of alignment, I feel like I'm just like banging my head into one wall after another. And it just is
Right.
like, this does not feel good. It doesn't feel right in my body. And so I think I just started, like, I just kept following the clues and I kept following the alignment and the desires, even if it was like, my desires don't make sense, or this is unreasonable, or nobody believes that this is possible. But it was just like,
Mhm.
it was worth it to keep going.
And you kept going. Those simple words mean so much. Keep going. That's what I love to say. I love to tell people, just keep going. I think I've actually heard that in a movie. I think it was Finding Nemo. Dory, the fish. Didn't she say that?
Yeah,
Just keep going. Just keep.
probably. Keep
It's
going.
stuck in my
Yeah.
head. So I'm thinking about that all the time, even with things that I want to do or that I, want to try. I'll take a few steps and then something might try to pull me back and I have to remind myself every day, just keep going, just keep going. So thank you for that. So desire led you
Mm.
to start your business or go all in full time. But did you officially plan for that? Or was it just a free flow and it, like you said, everything aligned and it fell into place? Was there any, intentional planning of
Mm.
that?
Say a bit of both. Like I mentioned before, I was definitely an overthinker. And so,
Mhm.
but the problem with being such an overthinker is you get really caught up in analysis paralysis, and I was always so hesitant and scared and doubting myself. So
Yeah.
yes, I planned, and yes, I was intentional, but I just took so long to do everything. Like the perfect contrast is, so a woman who, she and I both took coaching class. Like the coaching class number one is 3-day class. We were sitting next to each other on day one on Friday, and I find out, I bump into her at an event like a year later or something. She had literally started her coaching business the next day. Like she threw together a website, started reaching out to family friends, got her first clients, paid clients right away, and just, she built her confidence and her experience through actually doing coaching.
Wow.
I was so scared, and I had so much imposter syndrome that I was like, I need to, and I was probably overqualified before I even started the coaching class, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I instead took a year and a half to do all of my coach training. On top of that, I did a year of leadership training. And through that, I was like, maybe now, finally, I'll be confident enough to start. But then I was like, no. So I started my business, but I took 2 pro bono clients who I met with weekly in person in San Francisco at coffee shops, coached them for free for 6 months before I decided that I was quote unquote ready. And then I
Oh.
bumped into this woman, maybe it wasn't a year, some point later. And
Mm-hmm.
she had hit, in my industry, it's like reaching your 6-figure a year for the first time is like the holy grail. Everybody wants the 6-figure a year. And she had done it easily in her first year.
Wow.
And it took me, for context, it took me 6 years to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back at that and I'm like, she just took action right away. She didn't overthink it. She just went for it. I'm sure she failed all over the place and felt like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of that's part of the glory and the beauty of just failing forward and learning, because you learn so quickly when you just do the damn thing.
Yeah.
But I took so long and I was so hesitant. And that's kind of always been my theme. So it's something that I get to continuously work on. But now I forget what the original question was, but the my takeaway from all that is like, oh my gosh, stop with the overthinking and just act and figure it out. You'll figure it out
Oh,
along the way, and keep going, and also giving myself a lot of grace and I used to beat myself up a lot for like, you're taking too long. You should be so much further along. Look at all these other people on the internet who are so much further and they started after you. And now I'm just like, I'm exactly where I need to be. My
exactly.
journey is perfect
You're,
for me. It's taken longer, and that's okay. And
yes.
now I just get to decide, what do I do today? What do I do tomorrow? And I'm not going to waste
Mhm.
any more time beating myself up like I used to.
Everybody's journey is their own journey. That's something that I I'm getting better with that now, but I still have to remind myself. And overthinking, over planning, that has always been me.
So hard.
I even talked about that a little bit this week with this podcast. 4 years ago, I came up with this idea. And for 4 years, I sat on it for
Mhm.
all sorts of reasons. Oh, I don't know. I need to do some more research on this. I need to practice this. I need to read. I mean, you want to be prepared, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like you got the idea. You already have everything in you that you need to proceed. Go ahead and take action. So that is a
Yeah.
practice that you know I'm sure you're still working on, and that I'm getting better at myself.
Turns out Nike was right all those years ago. Just do it.
That's my
Just do it.
that's my mother's motto. She used to tell us that when I was a teenager all the time. Be like Nike and just do it.
Just do
And so
it.
that stuck with me too. So sometimes,
Totally.
that comes into mind. I'm like, yeah, let me just do it. Why am I waiting around?
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk finances. I mean, you mentioned that the holy grail in a coach's career is to hit that 6-figure mark. How important is it for you in this phase of your life to focus on wealth building and retirement strategies?
Very, because like with everything in my life, I have been such a late bloomer and I've gotten such a late start. Perfect example is I'm 44 and I'm 6 months pregnant with my first child.
Oh my
And we
gosh, I
didn't,
was saving that, but
thank you. Yeah, we didn't even, my husband and I have been together for 12 years and we always talked about it and it was like a maybe or a not yet. And then last summer we decided it was a no. And then we changed our minds. And in January, we're like, you know what? Let's give it a go. Let's see what happens. No pressure, no expectations, but like, let's just try. We got pregnant right away and everything's going really
wow.
well. But it's like, I was like, that is the most on brand thing that could happen to me and us, because I do everything later, including finances. So I was just basically like a hot mess all through my 20s. Like I said, I always made it work. But in the process, I ended up with a lot of credit card debt. I was like being an entrepreneur, but I didn't really get my act together to, pay estimated taxes. So I would end up with these big tax bills at the end of the year. It was like, shoot, I did it again. So then I ended up with like IRS installment plans a couple times, and then I just combined them. So then somehow I was 32 in 2012 and was like, I have $50,000 worth of debt right now, and I'm living paycheck to paycheck in the very expensive city of San Francisco. And I didn't tell anyone. So I was walking around with this huge burden, and I felt so ashamed. So of course I was already beating myself up for a lot of other reasons. And then I added that to it, and it became so heavy. And that was the year that my husband and I were in the middle of falling in love. And I was like, I have to tell him, because I think this is my person. And I can't walk into this relationship and be like, surprise, I also have 50K's worth of debt. How do you feel about that? So I told him, like, I fell for him so hard that I was like, I just have to be honest about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my dirty little secret, expecting him to basically be like, absolutely not, and like walk away. And of course he was so sweet and was like, how can I support you? Like, thank you so much for telling me. How can I support you? And that was enough. That helped me work up the courage then I told my mom, who was terrified to tell, because she's of the generation where like debt equals bad. And if you have debt, you've been like an irresponsible human. So that was really hard, but I did it and I survived. And then I told another group of supportive people. And then eventually I was like, okay, we all have dirty little secrets. It's fine. No point in hanging on to it. So I basically started healing the shame of that. And then I came up with a plan, and I put together a spreadsheet, and I got a debt consolidation loan, and I started chipping away. So for most of my 30s, I was not thinking about retirement. I was not thinking about investments. I was not thinking about wealth strategies. I was just like, I got to pay off this debt. This
Mm-hmm.
is literally, I was like, I can't even think about any of the other stuff until I pay off this, especially the high interest debt. Like some of the student loans, that's fine, 1 or 2%, but like the high interest debt, I was like, must clear this out as soon as possible. And it took a few years, but I was ruthless. I was cutting expenses wherever I could. I was trying to figure out how to increase income. I was growing my business. And then I was like, I would go into my spreadsheet every day. If I had paid off $10, I would mark it down so I could see the balance go down. And that was so empowering to me. So that I call that like the beginning of my big financial makeover in 2012. And then, fast forward however many years, and I paid off all of the debt, and since then have been completely debt free. And now I'm like, I have my husband and I are like credit card hackers, because we try to travel with points and stuff. So I'm like, I have many credit cards. They're all at zero all the time. My credit scores are in the 800s. They were like in the low 600s back in the day. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't even imagine getting them up to 700, and now they're in the 800s. And once I had all of that taken care of, then I started thinking about things like, okay, now I can think about wealth. Now I can think about tax strategies. Now I can think about even just this year, I switched from a different bookkeeping company to a company that is bookkeeping and accounting, and is helping me switch to an S corp from an LLC, and just these little tweaks to make everything more streamlined and more intentional and more just like really set up for my kind of business.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels so good. The best part about it is just taking radical responsibility for my own situation. And especially now with the baby on the way, I'm like, the stakes are higher. So I see so many, especially entrepreneurs, just kind of do what I did, where you're not thinking, all your friends have like retirement through their work and their taxes are paid
Right.
through work. So they don't think about it. And these are the things that I wish I had known as a baby entrepreneur to like, just, I would have loved to learn some basic personal finance stuff,
Yeah.
in high school, in college, in my 20s, but I didn't really learn any of that stuff until I realized I had to in my
Mm-hmm.
30s. And then since then, I've been kind of like catching up.
The po-
Luckily, I love it though.
I was going to say the important thing is you got your financial shit together,
Yes.
and you just shared some really good tips for our listeners, because you're right, business owners, that those components are not built in. You have to go and seek out,
Yeah.
financial management and tools and tax strategies and all of those things. So thank you
And
for sharing that.
the little light at the end of the tunnel for anyone else who has shame around debt, or who is stressed about money, or thinks it's all really confusing, or like
Mhm.
is anxious, is that I mean, money was literally the thing I was most ashamed about, most stressed about. It was the hardest thing, probably the biggest challenge I've been through in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It is now one of my biggest passions. Like I
Mm,
check all of my numbers every single day and I get like I'm like on a high every time I go in because I think it feels so good to be on top of it. And it feels so good to educate myself. Like I nerd out on learning personal finance now, whereas before I was just like la 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 la. Like I was
yeah.
hiding from it because it was too hard and too intimidating, and I felt so much shame.
Mm-hmm. I
So
used to
it
feel
can
the same
change. It gets
way.
better.
It does.
Yeah.
The original focus for this podcast was actually going to be on just building wealth. I only decided to open it up when I started traveling and meeting people who were defining success by, other things and not so much putting a focal point on finances, which is still super important.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? So that's why I shifted a little bit. And now I'm talking to all kinds of people who
Mm,
have success on many different levels. But the finance piece is something that we have to put time and attention into. It's about thinking about our future so that we're taken care of and our families. So thank you for that.
yeah. I love
Um,
talking about it. I think it's so much fun.
I know. And
It's
so
also fun because it
is
triggers
there,
people, it makes
right?
people uncomfortable. So it's fun. It's
Yeah,
a fun gateway to like all sorts of deeper conversations too.
that's true. Is your coaching business focused primarily on financial aspects, or is it just lifestyle in general?
It is. I'm actually one of the few people who hasn't niched down into one specific little area. I am like
Mm-hmm.
actually one of the general life coaches, which is one of the things I love about it. In 12 years, I've dabbled in going into different lanes and focusing more on I kind of like unintentionally became a career coach for a while. Just I think it's a product of living in the San Francisco Bay Area. People are very career focused and they would
Mm-hmm.
find me on Yelp and Google and like I've helped a lot of people with their career, but I've never identified as a career coach because I'm like, even if we're talking about your career, I was like, I'm helping you with your life. It's like I'm
Right.
helping them with their relationship with themselves. And I kind of don't care. I'm like, I don't really care if we're talking about your career, your relationships, your health. Because at the end of the day, it's like the relationship with themselves. And then it's designing a life they love. So I think of it as like, it could be like personal empowerment and lifestyle design or like authenticity and alignment. It's like who you are and then creating a life that you actually want. So it's like your insides and your outsides and making them match. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I get so lit up by.
Exactly. Um, I want to know, let's talk about your digital nomad lifestyle. I don't know how much you're nomading these days with the baby coming, but were you a solo traveler and what inspired you to kind of get on the road and travel?
And I think it was like written in the stars early on because I was born in Sweden. My dad is and his whole family are there. My mom is from Denmark. Her whole family's there. She and I moved to
Mm,
LA when I was 5, and I got a step family in Southern California. So suddenly I had these it's like a secret agent. I was living these two lives. I'd go back to Sweden for vacation, and then I was doing all my schooling and stuff in LA. And so from day one, I've always traveled internationally just to see family. But
mhm,
then all of my parents also traveled either for work or for play and stuff. So I grew up traveling. I'm very lucky to have gone on, a ton of international trips when I was little. So it was
very
just kind of
cool.
in my DNA. Like I've always loved it. And then, did all the scrappy traveling in my 20s and backpacking and cheap stuff and just whatever I could figure out. And then when I got with my husband, I realized he was very similar. He was also like going the unconventional path, wasn't going to do 9 to 5, was trying to figure it out. Also loved to travel, grew up in a family of travelers. And so we were like, this is just going to, we're going to have to build our lifestyle around travel, period. End of story. And when I started my business, I was like, this is going to be a lifestyle business. I'm going to build my business to fit around my lifestyle, not the other way around. And so, it took a little like experimentation and course correcting in the beginning, but ultimately we started traveling together. And then when we got married, most of our friends would like take a 2-week vacation for their honeymoon. We were like, we're living in San Francisco. It's pretty expensive, but we're making it work. We could probably travel for cheaper than living in San Francisco. We're like, should we just do it? And so we did. So we got married. We sold everything. We bought one-way tickets to Scandinavia to go. So he had never met my family. So we had him meet my
Mhm,
family. And then we just traveled for, I think we did 11 countries in 10 months. And that trip was kind of like I mean, one, it was like do we like each other enough to actually travel this long together? And it worked really well. We're like, okay, we're good. If you can travel together with your partner, you're like off to a good start. So it was kind of proof of concept for our marriage. And then it was the first time I went completely virtual for my business. I was doing like a combination before. I would meet people in person in coffee shops in San Francisco, which is fun. I love hugging my clients, but I was like, this is a lot more convenient. And it worked well, even with time differences and everything. I was just like, I was coaching people like on the beach in Vietnam. It was amazing. I was like, this whole digital nomad thing is pretty sweet. And then after that, we haven't gone on like a year-long trip like that since, but
Mhm.
we've done like smaller pockets. Like the year after we lived in a little apartment for a year, and then the year after that we would go to like South America for 3 months, and then we'd come back for a bit, and then we went to Europe for 2 months, and then we came back for a bit. So we'll do like 2 to 3 month chunks at a time. He's
Mhm.
got family in Costa Rica, so we often go there for weeks or months at a time, and it's just nice. Basically, our definition of being digital nomads is we have the option. We
Right.
can travel if and when we want to. I would still identify as a digital nomad, even if I owned a house and lived in it 95% of the time. It's just knowing that I can if I
Mhm.
want to, when I want to. And so, yes, as we're this year, we're not traveling a lot because baby, and then we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, a lot of people are like, the first 6 months are golden time. The baby just nurses while you take off and land, and they just sleep all the time. So
Yeah.
hopefully, as soon as we're able to, we'll get back into traveling, learning how to travel with a newborn, which I'm sure will
Right.
be an adventure in its own. But yeah,
That's amazing, though, that experience that you and your husband took to just sell everything and get on the road for 11 months. And it's something
it
that
was
I
so
like
great.
to do, also a digital nomad for the past few years. And the freedom is just unmatched. I mean, I can't describe it. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
at my best self, when I'm away because I have come to learn that I like being on the road. So, sometimes in looking at friends or people I know, and they're very grounded and their communities where they live in their respective cities, and I'm like, I'm just not there yet, and I don't know if I'll ever get there. I mean, I really do enjoy being on the road.
Yeah.
So, you were lucky to find someone compatible like that because it's hard to find a partner, unless you get lucky and you meet someone on the road and, they have the same goals and aspirations as you do and they're on the same page with the travel piece. But it's pretty difficult because most people, I guess around my age, maybe a little bit younger, are thinking about, I'm ready to settle down. Where should we settle down? And that
Mhm.
I don't know. That's such a trigger for me. I don't even like the word settle. Like I don't even think I use it.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good
Yeah.
for you. I'm so happy.
And it's
And
I think it's a reminder about the importance of whether someone is early in a relationship or dating or trying to find their person or whatever. It The importance of communicating clearly about our like non-negotiables, about our dreams and desires and our values. And it's so easy for people to get up and get into relationships and just kind of assume that the other person
oh
is
my
on the
God.
same page, and then like not talk about it, and then suddenly you've quote unquote settled down and you buy a house and you have kids and you have careers, and then you realize there's some like pretty core issues that we never talked about.
Right.
Like money is a great one, or like, I don't know, are we going to raise our kids with any kind of religion or spiritual practice, or like schooling, and it's like they just never talk about it, and then suddenly they're like, oh wait, we have very different mindsets about this. We probably should have brought it up.
I know. So Sandra, before we get into the strawberry round, I did want to talk about baby for a minute. I was waiting for that when I read that you decided at the age of 43 to start a family. I thought, wow,
Mhm.
because I mean, I don't know about you, but all my life I was told that, oh, you have to have kids by this age and, right after college and over 30 odds, it's very dangerous. You can't have
Geriatric.
this
Yeah.
baby. Exactly. I'm like, no, don't
Yeah.
say that word to
Yeah.
me. Because I thought about it too. But I think it's fabulous, and I think my sister, she has an older son, my nephew, I think is 18 now, but she's, had a baby at 40 or 41. We were just talking about that, I'm like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I can't believe like, you were that age." So I had been thinking about it, I'm not sure, it's my daughter is 24, so I would be starting over, but it is something that I think about all the time. I'm like, "Oh, I love kids." So I'm so excited for you, and when is baby coming?
Thank you. Uh, Official due date is Halloween, and I'm like,
Wow.
if this baby is on brand for me, he'll probably come late. So I'm guessing sometime in the first 2 weeks of November that's the window I've got my money on. We'll see.
Oh my gosh. So how do you feel? I mean, you look great.
I feel amazing, and it could be completely random, and maybe I'm just like one of the lucky ones who, for whatever reason. But I also would like to think that a lot of things that I've done in my life that I was doing anyway really helped prepare me for this. Like now that I'm actually paying attention to pregnancy and delivery and the
Mhm.
mindsets that like just our conditioning would
Yeah.
have us have around all of this stuff, and like what we see on TV and the media about, it's like, wow, like I'm like, so many women are conditioned to basically be terrified of the whole process,
Yeah.
not trust their bodies, like completely buy into just like this is basically like a traumatic medical experience. And so I'm like, I just like with most things in my life, I've chosen to opt out of most of the societal narratives because I just find them incredibly unhelpful and disempowering for the most part. And so I think the things I was doing in my life anyway, I've always done a lot of work around loving and accepting my body, trusting my body. I've had a huge commitment to health and wellness and total fitness freak. So I'm very strong and healthy anyway. And I think even though my husband and I were like, we don't know, kids, maybe, and we didn't stress about it, but it was just always like
Mhm.
a big question mark. And yet, interestingly, now that I look back, I kind of always had this like intuition or knowing that if we were to try, I was just like, I kind of feel like I would get pregnant right away. And I've always had this suspicion that like if I ever got pregnant, I think I would love it.
Mhm.
And I've had just these other like little inclinations about what the experience might be like for me. And so far they've all been like shockingly accurate. Like we
Mm.
literally got pregnant on the first try. And,
Wow.
and I'm 43 and a half when we started.
Yeah.
Like, what are the chances the chances of getting pregnant are so much lower. The chances of it sticking, it's like the miscarriage rates in my age group are like pretty close to 50%. It's like 40, 50% or something like that. And yet I think we talked about it so openly, and we very intentionally removed all pressure, removed all expectations, and we're like, whatever happens is great. We've already proven that we're happy, just the two of us. Maybe we'll get some animals, great. But we're
Mhm.
like, if it happens, like let's just, and then it happened right away. And then I went into it thinking like I'm gonna love being pregnant, and I've loved being pregnant, and I had, almost no, like very little nausea, and the fatigue is very it's just like it's all been, and who knows, I don't know what my delivery or any of that's going to be like, but I'm walking
Right.
into it with like no attachments, but a very just like trust and surrender. And I'm reminding myself that like we've been doing this for a very long time as humans and as women, and we are incredibly powerful. And the more we trust our bodies, the more they tell us what they need and what to do in the moment. So I think we've been conditioned to outsource our power and give our power away and like listen to everybody else. And yes, like I'm we're not going to like, free birth in the woods or anything. Like we are going to do a hospital birth, and we have a doula, so we're kind of like combining, sort of western and spiritual. But um so I do trust those things, and I'm ready and open to, interventions as needed. But I'm walking into it with so much intention and so much trust and like excitement. And
Mhm.
I'm choosing to seek out story. I'm watching so many birth videos. They're mostly like home births and water births. And I'm kind of like brainwashing myself with empowering, beautiful, sacred, natural, primal examples in my brain so I'm reminding myself to trust myself.
And
You know
that's
what I mean?
beautiful. Trusting yourself. And you're doing everything with intention, which is really important. And like you said, our bodies do talk to us. They do tell us what we need, where we should go. They guide us. So
Yeah. And
right on point with that.
we haven't really been taught to listen to them or how to
No.
trust them or how to access that intuition. But I think in choosing to do so, we can really practice and train ourselves more and more to listen
Hmm.
and tune
Indeed,
in.
we can. And on that note, yeah, I just want to say I'm so excited about I feel like
Thank
I'm meeting more and more women who are choosing to start a family over the age of 40. Like just
Yeah.
the past couple of months, I met so many, and it's their first one. I'm like, wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And they're like, yeah, doctor used to tell me, the window was closing in, but I didn't believe that. Here we are, 46 with a baby. So,
I'll just give a shout out to my primary care physician. I am with Kaiser, which I have mixed feelings about in certain ways. But I'd heard good things about their labor and delivery, so I was like, I think it's okay. But I had a my assigned doctor was much older, and I was like, I would like to have a younger, more progressive person. And so I just like picked somebody off the website who looked young, essentially. And
mhm.
I go in and see him, and we do just general labs and like annual physical. And then I was like, also, my husband and I are thinking about trying to conceive and da da da. I'm 43. Like, what do I need to know? Expecting him to be like, here's a list of tests you need to do and genetic this and blah, 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 and risk factors. And he was like, folate. He's like, take prenatals. And I was like, I just started that a couple weeks ago. What else? And he was like, have a great time. I was like, are you serious?
Wow.
Like, that's it? I thought he was gonna, I was bracing myself for like
Mhm.
geriatric and advanced stage. And of course I chose a younger doctor. So I think that worked. But he didn't use any of those words. All he said was, have so much fun. I'm so excited for you. He's like, if nothing happens in 6 months, come back. We'll talk about the options.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I was like, okay, amen to that. That's so much better than what I was expecting. And it just really helped and empowered me to be like, it's fine. Like we live in 2024. Like it's fine.
Yes. I love that. All right. So, strawberry round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions and you keep your answer short and sweet. You ready?
Ready.
Name a book that has inspired you tremendously.
Um, Rich as Fuck by Amanda Francis.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Has she written other books about money?
That is her, I think that's her first
Okay.
book, but she's one of my favorite teachers of all time, but she's definitely my favorite money teacher. And her book is, I mean, you can tell by the title, it's very in your face
Right.
and it goes against everything we've been taught. And it's just so refreshing and
Okay.
so
Awesome.
inspiring. Yeah.
I have to check that out. What's a software tool or an app you can't live without, personal or professional use?
I mean, all the Google suite, like I live and die by my Google Calendar. And then I use 17 Hats as my CRM, and I have used it for like 10 years and I love it.
Oh, and that's 17 hats with a T. Okay.
17hats.com. Yeah, it was like
Oh,
built by photographers, but it just happens to work really well for coaching. So it's great for solopreneur and like online businesses and just kind of
cool.
has all the different things you need. I like having a lot of things in one place.
Yeah, so do I. Name someone you'd love to have lunch with and why.
I'm going to repeat my other answer and say Amanda Francis because she's such I love the way she thinks. I love the way she talks and the way she sees the world is it's like what I'm striving for in terms of how to see the world.
Good. Do you have a life motto or a favorite quote?
Many, but my current favorite is credit goes to another teacher of mine called Andrea Crowder. And she says, you are allowed to change your mind about anyone or anything at any time, which is very fitting for this show of yours. And it is like my husband and I are like, I mean, clearly with baby thing, like we decided it was a no last summer, and then we're like, actually, let's do it.
Exactly. Do you have any? Oh, one last question. What's your top self care ritual?
I am a huge introvert and a huge personal development junkie, and so I know that I just need to give myself me time every day. And that often looks like solo time. So it's like long walks, listening to podcasts, quiet time when no one else is around. And as long as I have that me time, I'm great.
So important, the me time. I'm an introvert as well. And that's probably one of the things that kept me back from doing this podcast. Like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to people all the time. It
Yeah,
actually gives me energy. But like you said,
same.
I absolutely have to take a rest and recharge.
Yeah.
So I understand that. And Sandra, do you have any final words for our listeners to take as encouragement or advice to pivot and live life intentionally?
I would say listen to your desires because they are one of the best. They're like the best inner GPS system I've ever
Hmm.
found. Like, and not just like what you think you should want, like your deep desires, the ones that maybe you're embarrassed to even say out loud. You
Right.
don't have to say them out
Yeah.
loud, but like listen to them and just give them some space
I agree.
because
I
they will
think
guide
that
you.
if more people were guided by their desires, I mean, as long as they're not out here hurting people, the
Right.
world would be a better place. Don't you think?
Yeah,
It's like, be yourself. Live authentically. The person
mm,
who you were meant to be
totally.
is so important. Live
And we're so
free.
afraid. We're afraid to do that because we're afraid of being selfish or whatever. And I'm like, actually be
Mm,
selfish, because the more desire led you are, the more you fill your cup, the more you put on your oxygen mask, the more you are so fulfilled that you can't help but help others. So it's like fill your
mm.
cup and then just like let it splish splash all over everything and everyone around you. But that's not going to happen if we're not lit up.
Right. Right. Oh my gosh. And finally, do you have any links you want to share with our guests? Whatever you tell me, I'll be sure to put it in the show notes.
Yes, so I am very easy to find on the internet. You can literally just Google my name, but also sandrapossing.com is where my hub for everything on my website. I'm at Sandra Possing on all the social medias. And then I also have a podcast called Oh Hi Self. You can find me on all the podcast platforms there. And that's a podcast all about the stuff, personal development, essentially bringing you back home to your authentic self.
And you're right, you are very easy to find. You have your first and last name on everything. That was very easy. I like that.
Yep.
And your podcast is great, by the way. I've listened to a couple
Thank you.
episodes. I'm like, oh my
Thank you.
gosh, I like her. Yeah.
Woo.
She said what I believe. Anyway, Sandra, it has been a joy getting to know you. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much
Same.
for participating on the show.
Thank you too. This was so easy. I
Yeah,
feel like we could just chit chat over coffee for like another 7 hours.
I know. I know, but it's time to recharge. I don't know about you, but I'm
Yes.
ready to
Yep.
recharge. I've been on the phone
Yep.
all day. So take
Thanks so
care
much.
and congratulations on the baby. Bye bye. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of the MILFs Who Pivot podcast. Please take a minute to leave a review and don't forget to follow the show, download the episodes, and share with the other MILFs in your life. Listen in on any of the major platforms, including Apple and Spotify, or watch our videos on YouTube. You can join the community on Facebook and Instagram at MILFs Who Pivot Podcast.